Our scripture reading this morning is from Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2 through 7. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in a pitch-dark land, light has dawned. You have made the nation great. You have increased its joy. They rejoiced before you as with joy at the harvest, as those who divide plunder rejoice. As on the day of Midian, you've shattered the yoke that burdened them, the staff on their shoulders, and the rod of their oppressor. Because every boot of the thundering warriors and every garment rolled in blood will be burned, fuel for the fire. A child is born to us, a son is given to us, and authority will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be vast authority and endless peace for David's throne and for his kingdom, establishing and sustaining it with justice and righteousness now and forever. The zeal of the Lord of heavenly forces will do this.
Our gospel reading today comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Everything came into being through the Word, and without the Word, nothing came into being. What came into being through the Word was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish the light. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I wonder, have you ever made a collage? Now, these days, we've got these wonderful automated programs where you plug in all your photographs and then it arranges them all into this beautiful collage. Then you spend $30 and it'll be delivered to your door and you put it up on your wall and it looks really nice. But what I'm thinking of, too, is not only something like that, but what I'm thinking of, too, is when I was younger, I would cut and paste a bunch of pictures together into a collage. I remember flipping through my favorite magazines and clipping out the pictures and then with some Elmer's glue on a poster board, pasting them all together to look really nice. And so those were, for my teenage years, those were some really serious art projects, putting those collages together. They were beautiful to me at the moment. Now they might seem a little silly, but then they were beautiful. Well, I want you to think about something. If you were to add a picture to a collage, and the theme of the collage was joy, we said we're all going to paste together a picture that depicts joy, what picture would you put up on the collage? I want to show you, my mind immediately went to one picture. Now, I'll show it to you, and I think I've showed this to you once before, but here it is. That's me with my step-grandpa Bob, and he's giving me a ride on his lawnmower. And I think if there was ever a moment in my life where I felt some joy, surely that was one of them. Here I was, a little boy, my grandpa giving me a ride, carting around his lawn. And I look at that picture and I think, whatever that was, I want that. And I think, too, of all of the nonsense in life that tries to beat that joy out of us. I mean, we all go through so many things that try to take away that joy, but I think I see that picture and I think, whatever that is, I want that. I want more of that. Well, what's the picture you would add to our collage of joy? Would it be blowing out the candles of a birthday cake? Would it be walking across the stage at graduation? Would it be dancing on your wedding day? What is the picture of joy for you? Now, Isaiah gives us a little collage, many images of joy, and he kind of pieces them all together to give us this one big picture. And the first one is this. He says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. I know what it's like to go running early in the morning on a summer morning when it's still dark. You start out and it's dark and you're looking at every step to make sure you don't step in a pothole or something like that. And then slowly the sun comes up, the light comes up on you, and how good it feels to finally have some light. If you've ever stumbled around in the dark, you know what this is like to have joy and lights coming. Imagine being stuck in a cave. Maybe you go exploring a cave, and I think the rule is you're supposed to bring 3 sources of light whenever you go into a cave, just in case 2 of them go, you've still got 1. But imagine you've only brought 1 and that light goes away, and then you wait to be rescued. And then maybe eventually you hear noises, and then you see light bouncing along the cave, and you know you've been rescued. That's kind of like the picture that Isaiah puts up in this collage. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. But then there's another picture that Isaiah adds to it. The joy of the harvest. I've been a hobbyist gardener for years, and I know that moment of when you finally are able to pick something from your garden and eat it, and you're like, wow, this is the food that I grew, and I tended it, and it's nourishing me. There's so much joy there, but I don't live or die based upon whatever I harvest. But imagine the joy if you did that for a living. The joy of taking in a harvest. My dad and I, one time we were driving past a freshly harvested field, and my dad said, think of all of the work. The farmer plowed and took care of the soil and planted and tended and finally reaped the crop, and finally, after all of that work and after so many months, he finally has a harvest. I don't know what that's like, but it has to be such a happy moment for a farmer taking in the harvest. It has to be such a relief, such a joy to bring in the harvest. I'm guessing that there's probably a party, a celebration, a dinner out, or just maybe even a nice meal at home. But there's joy there. And that's what Isaiah depicts. Isaiah says, we have rejoiced before you as with joy at the harvest. And then Isaiah adds one more picture up to the collage. It's freedom from oppression, freedom from slavery. I certainly can't comprehend this. I don't know what that's like to be set free. I imagine the feeling of the last day of school and the bell ringing. That feeling times 1,000 must be a little bit what that's like. Someone living in slavery and then set free, someone imprisoned, and then the doors are finally open, they can go free. I talk a lot about Viktor Frankl, who was imprisoned as a Jewish man during the Holocaust, and he talked about when they were first freed, he survived it, and when they were freed, he said that they didn't know how to respond, that the joy was just kind of beat out of them after so many years of joylessness. But finally, they'd been just locked up emotionally and physically in so many ways. But he says finally, after they were freed, a few days later, he took a walk through a flowery field. And he said there was nothing around him but just the space of the field and the sky above him, the flowers all around him. And he said he fell down to his knees. And he said, I called to the Lord from my narrow prison cell. And he answered me in the freedom of space. Freedom from oppression, from slavery. That's joy. And that's another picture that Isaiah puts up in this collage. He says this, you have shattered the yoke that burdened them, the staff on their shoulders, and the rod of their oppressor. But then Isaiah puts up one more picture on this collage, another one. Soldiers leaving war. My grandpa, who I showed you the picture of earlier, he was in the Pacific Islands during World War II. And he didn't really talk about it much, as is true for most soldiers, I think. But one thing he did say was he was never as happy as he was the moment when the ship they were on came back into San Francisco, and he said, and they saw the Golden Gate Bridge. He said he was never as happy as he was that moment. Because it was over. They were going back home. And the soldiering was done. The war was over. I can't imagine what that's like. For it just to be over. In my hometown, at the end of World War II, I read that they wheeled a piano out into an intersection in downtown, closed off the streets. and people gathered around the piano, and someone accompanied the piano, and they sang hymns because it was over. It was done. What Isaiah puts up in this collage is an image like that. It says, because every boot of the thundering warriors and every garment rolled in blood will be burned, fuel for the fire. The clothing that soldiers wore is thrown on the fire because it's not needed anymore. It's like that old spiritual says, I'm going to study war no more. It's over. But there's one final picture that Isaiah adds to this collage. A collage sometimes needs a central image. Those collages I made as a teenager sometimes would be that way. In the middle there would be a bigger picture, one that kind of ties it all together. And this is the image that Isaiah gives us. A child being born. I bet for many of you, if you were to put up a picture on the collage, a picture of joy, it would be the picture of your child coming into your family. Mom or dad in the delivery room holding the newborn child. Grandma or grandpa the first time holding their grandchild. Maybe the picture of the day the adoption agency social worker finally brought your new child home to you. I remember just 3 years ago going down to the hospital front door with our little guy. They played the cradle music in the hospital over the loudspeakers, and I thought, holy cow, this thing is happening. And being as scared as ever, but also being awed by the experience, and more than any of that, just joyful. Isaiah adds a picture like that too. He says this, a child is born to us, a son is given to us, and authority will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Now, Isaiah's people heard this at the time that Isaiah was writing this as in terms of a king who would bring about a reign of peace and joy being born among them. And of course, we hear this, we listen to these words at this time of Advent before Christmas and thinking about the birth of Jesus, and we say, here's joy. Joy seems to me a rare thing these days. I mean, and this has been a rough year. No doubt about it. No way to say it any other way. We've all lost things that bring joy and happiness to us. But I think even in normal circumstances these times, that joy is a rare thing. I don't know. I think we have things that are fun for us. I think we have things that entertain us, and nothing wrong with having those things. We all enjoy things that are fun or entertaining, but joy seems to me a deeper thing, a more significant thing, a lasting thing. It's a whole different thing than fun or entertainment. We may have fun, I think, these days, but joy is maybe more elusive for us. But Isaiah here is trying to give us a picture here of what joy is like. And so this collage of pictures put together, this mosaic of the little pieces forming a bigger picture, all the pieces spell out joy to us. Isaiah is trying to describe to us what joy looks like, and the core of that is what God is doing and the freedom that God is bringing. And for us as Christians, we point to the child in the manger, to Jesus, and we say, from here comes joy. We've all had disappointments this year, every single one of us. But for us, there's still joy. We have all had sadness, but we still can have joy. We all have struggled and will still struggle, but we still have joy. We all may miss one another, but we still have joy. Joy like the sun rising from the darkness. Joy like the farmer finally bringing home his harvest after so many months of work. Joy like freedom from slavery, freedom from captivity. Joy like the soldier coming home and leaving war behind. Joy like a child being born. Because of this, Christ enters the world as a child, humble, in love, to love us, to restore us, and ultimately to give us joy. Amen.